Thank you so much, Rasha, for this presentation. Unfortunately, it had to come to an end. On the bright side, however, we have now the panel discussion about reinventing print strategies for digital success. I will leave the stage for our moderator, Rita Makhoul, the managing editor of ArabNet, to take over and introduce her esteemed panelists. Please join me welcoming Rita.
Good morning. Oh, I didn't realize you were that tall. How's everybody doing today? I hope everybody's awake already. You've all gotten your coffee intake. Excellent. First, before we begin, how many of you have checked for the news or read an article online this morning, like on your phone, on a laptop? How many of you have scrolled down through a social media platform, found an interesting article, clicked it open? Yeah, just show me, excellent. So basically that's what we're going to be talking about next. All the print publishers have been going through this challenge. It's no secret. This is what everybody's doing. Everyone's on their phone. It's been like this for years. It's not a trend. This is here to stay. So what are the challenges that print publishers are going through nowadays in transforming to digital? They got to reach you, the audience. It's no longer just through print, or we'll see more on that with the panelists we have next. So we're going to be discussing the strategies they have to take, the types of content creation that needs to be done, how to monetize this all. So I'd like to welcome our two panelists, Mr. Ayman Haidar, MD at Mediaquest, and Moustafa Ismail, please, from DMS Regional Director of Solutions. Please correct me if I got any of your names wrong or titles wrong as well. The second or third chair, please. Good morning. How are you?
Morning.
There we go. Do you guys want to start with a little introduction about yourselves before we begin and dive right into the topic?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Ayman Haidar. I'm the managing director of Mediaquest. We are a publishing company that started basically in print, but of course, with how things evolved and with technology, we are now a publishing house that does publish on different platforms. So we do publish print, which is our main bread and butter, but today we've actually evolved into having a huge platform on digital as well. Today we'll talk about what's happening to print, how our things are going, how did digital complement print, and would print last or not, probably.
Morning, everyone. Moustafa Ismail from DMS. I'm the Regional Director for Solutions. My main role is to basically look at the overall strategies for DMS across the region, as well as product adoption overall in Saudi, Lebanon, Egypt, and a few other places. Back to the point, today we also have print as part of our portfolio, but we've been focusing a lot on our digital assets in the past 2 to 3 years, I would say, and looking forward for the discussion today to talk about the transformation.
Great, thank you. Can we start with the big question? Is print going to die? What do you guys think?
So I think you summed it up quite well when you asked the question, who has read today anything on the news on their mobile? And we didn't see enough hands, so I'm going to ask the question again. Has anybody read anything on the news today from their laptop or mobile? Okay, great. Has anybody read the newspaper in the past 3 days? Okay, we still have a few hands. I don't think print is going to die. I think print as a news medium is going to die because of two reasons, accessibility and recency. When you're looking today and reading a newspaper, you're basically technically reading or living in yesterday's world, because the newspaper has probably been printed at 6 to 7 p.m., except probably for the first page that has been if something super happened during the night, probably printed at 11 or 12, which puts you in yesterday's world. While digital, you're connected, you're recent, plus the accessibility factor. I don't need to go out and look for a newspaper in ArabNet to figure out what today's news are, but I can easily take my mobile and read what's happening overall. So print as a news medium, I think it's not dead yet, but it's on the way. That's my opinion. But print as a niche, so if you look at something as National Geographic, for example, people are still going to want to open that magazine and look at that beautiful picture of a shark eating a seal. Don't ask me why a shark eating a seal, but I think I just saw that yesterday. People are still going to want to see that in a nice picture in the magazine. If we're going to go more on the news side or the political side, there are still going to be really good writers on The Economist that you're going to want to hear their opinions about and hold that magazine and read it from back to front. So on that level, I don't think it's going to die.
I'll have to agree with Moustafa, but I think human beings are traditional people. I mean, we are traditional in everything that we do. If you look at the desks in front of you, you see that you guys have put a pencil and a paper for notes. And most of the people, when they go to meetings, they do still use the pen and a paper. Although a scientist at NASA in the 1990s, when the huge evolution of computers and technology was happening, they said that by the year 2000, no one's going to actually use a pen. We're 2017 almost, and everybody's still using a pen and a paper. There will be a split. I mean, people will be probably more ease of use, maybe. They might switch to using their own iPads or tablets, mobile phones to take notes. But for me, at least, I mean, it's still easier for me to use a pen and a paper. Same goes for print. Let's put it this way. Yes, we will not be able to, a lot of news brands might not be able to keep up with the speed of internet and all this. But, I mean, specialized and niche brands will still exist. How far are we off the States and Europe today when it comes to digital? And we're a couple of years behind. Yes, we're trying to catch up. They're still using print, and a lot of brands are still working extremely well, but they cannot be a standalone as a print product. They need to evolve. They need to take a step forward. And this is where the digital aspect comes in. There's a lot of pros and cons for both brands, but I mean both platforms. Yes, print is slowly, I'm not going to say dying because we really don't know. It might eventually die based on how fast technology evolves and what we come up with. I mean, they say that it'll be cheaper to have LED screens on your wall than actually painting them in the future. But will that actually happen? We don't know. If technology keeps on going that fast, then yes, I would say print might not have a chance, but for now, it'll survive.
Ayman, can you tell me what do you think, or what has been the biggest challenges like print publishers have gone through the past couple of years, or are still going through, Kaman?
You know, it's a fashion. It's the fashion of things. It's the trend. It's what's happening around clients. It's what happens abroad, and we, unfortunately, sometimes we're kind of followers in this region. And when the whole digital boom happened, people thought that everything is going to just stop and everything is going to go digital. I would say the challenges that we're facing today is there's a lot of challenges for print, to start with. Research is one of them. Today, we really don't know how strong a platform is. Measurement is a big problem when it comes to print compared to digital. I mean, in digital, it's much easier for you to really measure the reach or what brands want to achieve. While in print, it's still very, very difficult for us to really know the conversion or the return on investment and so on and so forth. This is something that print versus digital face. But to make up for this, a lot of print brands have gone digital as well. So they complemented the brand that they have on a digital platform. So today they speak to an audience that still prefers print or uses print from time to time, but they also talk to their readers on a digital platforms. So that's one of few challenges that we have today. And of course, writing on a print platform is completely different than writing on a digital platform. And moving from a full-fledged print to whether to complement digital or to complement the print brand, or to evolve and having a 360-degree offering of a print plus mobile plus digital platform, you can't have the same writers. You need to either train them to evolve, or you need to get someone an editor who knows how to write on a digital platform.
This brings us to content creation. How does the editorial calendar change? How does the strategy change? Do they just stick to writing? Do they write differently? Do they introduce videos? Should they have something different? Like, do they have different types of articles on their print than they do on their website? And what do they share online? So if we can talk more about the content creation aspect, and if we can touch a little bit as well on possibly talent acquisition, what kind of teams do they need? It's possibly a lot different than what it used to be before.
Sure. So I think there is one of the biggest challenges that the news industry is facing in general is with the introduction of digital and the movement towards eyeballs from the print to the digital screen is the news itself, right? So on a newspaper, people used to open up the newspaper and read. On the digital front, through the mobile, people are reading shorter pieces of news. So you need to give in the information or write the piece of information, write the piece of content to be as short as possible, as straight to the point as possible, and also as entertaining as possible. If you take an example for New York Times, and I've been following their content strategy for a while, on their mobile, let alone their newspaper, on their mobile screen, the news is very straight to the point, very short, very direct. On their desktop, actually, one of the first things that you see is in the past couple of days was a huge picture of a surfer. And before the political news, and that's New York Times, because they know that, and once you click on it, you go into a much more immersive experience. You get to see, again, a very kind of National Geographic kind of approach, very fine pictures and so on. That tells you that these guys understood that when a person is behind a desktop screen, their experience is completely different from looking at their mobile. So when you look at the kind of people working on these kind of news on a mobile screen and the kind of people and talent that are working on the desktop screen, they're completely different talents. One is more very focused on videos, on images, on entertainment, and the other is more focused on news. But then comes the bigger aspect of news, and this is the part where it gets a bit tricky. One of the chief editors of Wall Street Journal was talking in a conference, and he was saying that one of his biggest problems today is that his best editors and his best writers are no longer the ones that are getting the highest eyeballs because people are not willing to read that much. And if you go into that aspect, it's very dangerous because people are misinformed. I was watching something today on social media, and it was a quote from Denzel Washington. He was like, if you don't read the news, you're uninformed. And if you read the news, you're misinformed. And that's kind of true because people are not actually reading the news. They're reading titles. And how are you going to get people and entice them to read that title, but also start going a bit deeper into the content that's being written? is a challenge, a big challenge that the industry is facing overall. So the kind of talent that you need of copywriters and video bloggers and editors have become completely different from what it used to be.
In terms of a challenge, I must totally agree. As an editor, it's a constant thing we have is okay, if I shorten the pieces and they're a lot shorter, people don't want to read as much, they're just going to skim. I'm like, how do you deliver without affecting the integrity, without affecting the research? You want to be straight to the point, but you also want to be relevant. You want whoever's reading you to relate to what they're reading. Everyone's telling us skip the emotions and just give us the facts, or forget the facts, just make it entertaining. There's always that fine line of how far can you go, and it also comes down to social media as well. There's a whole clickbait thing, what the headlines are like for people to click on, and it's a whole different type of world. Some people I've seen have probably solved the long articles by subheadings or something so people can go down and skim, and they choose what to select from the article. How far should an editor go in regards to getting the readers? And how about social media as well? What kind of captions should be done? How should they be shared? Where should they be shared? There's all these new tools right now. There's that, what's called Google AMP. There's Facebook. There's and not just Facebook social, there's all these places for articles and Flipboard. So how do you get that right audience without affecting integrity, without affecting the integrity of what you're writing, and at the same time getting that audience that you want?
You need to really understand who you're talking to through what medium or what platform that you want to use. Yes, you're right. Today on digital, the things tend to be much shorter. You need to skip a lot of things. It can't be that in-depth that it can't have a lot of emotions. They might need to read a couple of 300 words, let's say, straight to the point about some article. Some other platforms, or even on digital, they use the in-depth part because they know the readers come here to really read long in-depth stories or articles. Now, if you really study who your readers are on each platform, you would know how to go about all this. So whether you need to, we know for a fact that in print you go more in depth. We go much longer. The time spent on that specific medium or a specific article in that medium is longer than the time spent on digital. Although they can stay on the same page but read several articles at the same time, which makes both really it's really entertaining to really understand and know each reader, be it print or digital. So if you understand your reader, you would know how and what to write and how long the article should be or what to use. Do we need to include emotions? Do we go straight to the point? But there's no doubt that, and as I said, those who are writing digital should be completely different from those who are writing on print, or at least each should really wear the hat of digital or print while writing on the mediums, because those who read print don't have the same objective of those who are reading on digital.
Well, it's a very tough question, and I think it's a question that the whole world is asking today. And if I go back to it, it gets a bit tricky, because if you're going to create today a piece of article and you want to make a point and you want to add to it, like you said, facts and emotions and opinions, and to get that really proper view of the story or proper opinion that you have as an editor, and you're sending it or you're publishing it to someone who is ideally not going to spend more than 90 seconds on it, then you have an issue, right? And I think this is where data could come into play. This is where, if you know the kind of reader or who's on your website or on your platform, this is when you can start creating different edits for different users. If you have a user that spends on average 90 seconds or 3 to 4 minutes on an article, compared to a kind of user who's willing to sit down there behind the screen for 20 and 30 minutes, I'm not sure there's a lot of users who would spend that much time. But this is when you can start playing around a little bit with the content, and going back to Ayman's point, also depending on the platform itself. And it gets a bit tricky here because you mentioned social media. And today, let's say بعد الشر, an earthquake happens as we're sitting down. The first two pieces of news that's gonna reach out, or the first two platforms that are gonna touch base on that point is Richter scale and Twitter. Before any news,
or someone dying Snapchatting the earthquake.
Yeah, exactly. So if he has enough time, right? So the point being, there is no way that the news can compete with them on that level. But then comes the data part and the publishing piece, where they can take the information of the users on their platforms and make content that's relevant to them in terms of context, but also in terms of the intensity of the content itself.
All right. Deb, in terms of, because you keep talking about measurement, metrics, you got to know your readers. So let's go to the part, the science. A lot of us don't like, and a lot of us, I mean, I really am not a big fan of, but it's a requirement. You know, it's like when you come as an editor and you're like metrics, measurement, optimize your audience, like numbers. How long does a person spend on a page? How long? What should an editor take in consideration? How should they revise your schedules, write differently? What are the numbers they should look at? What should they look at to optimize? Come in. What tips would you give? Here, I'm over here. I'm asking for your help. Help me here.
I think the first thing that you would probably need to do is proper analysis of everything that you write. So every time you write about a topic, you need to see how much time spent was on this topic. Did you reach the audience that you want to reach? So my question to you would be, when you write a piece of content, are you trying to reach everyone? You're always trying to reach a specific segment, right? So was this the segment that paid the highest level of attention, or did you grab an attention of a completely different kind of segment? Did they spend enough time on your article or not? Or did they just go in and quickly bounce out? What was the level of, did they share the article? What was the level of discussion and engagement that happened with the article is also something extremely important. And also revisits. So how long was the article on the platform, on the first page, for example, that you see, compared to it going a bit to the back pages? So these are all things that you probably want to start looking at and comparing it to the different articles that you write to see where are your segment that you're trying to reach or your users are actually giving you the most attention, and when is very important.
How much should a writer think about SEO when they're writing?
You want to take this, Ayman?
I mean, it's all about SEO. I mean, you can't write. This is why we said writers, editors that write on print can't write on digital, or they need to be trained to write on digital, because it's all about the search engine optimization. Every single word that you use, every subject you talk about, everything that you do on digital has an effect on how people search for, or how you appear in the search for such topics. It's definitely one of the most important items that that needs to be on your to-do list or think about while writing an article. That's for sure.
And how about introducing other types of medium, where we're talking about videos, infographics, like come in. We're talking about how people have, like on digital, they're a lot more visual. So how do you tell a story on video versus writing? When do you introduce video? When do you not?
I think all the stats have shown that when there's audio visuals, there is a high level of attention. It's not a big secret. Everybody knows that, right? So where video can be introduced, I think it's a big plus. That's in my opinion. When it shouldn't be introduced, I'm not sure that there's any time where video you should say, I don't want to, show an image or show a video or show anything like that. If you look at some of the data that we have, it shows that if an article has a video or has an image, on average, it's X6 times more engagement. And there's a higher chance of people actually spending more time on it. And I think it's just the way our mind works, right? When we see audio and visual, we start to interact more, we start to engage more. And this is the big advantage that we have on digital today. Where we shouldn't see video, again, back to this point, I think when you're going straight to the facts, I think when you have a short story, I don't see the use of video being extremely important, even though that we have seen those 30 seconds and 40 seconds video from companies like AJ and companies like Vice, which have done a good job in actually creating those short videos to tell a story.
All right, so now they've created the right kind of content. They've distributed it in the right channels. All written nicely, they've got the videos, they've got the nice visuals, they're reaching their target. Now, how do they make money? How do you monetize?
There's so many ways of using all this. I mean, and you're talking here on digital, or you're talking about cross-platforms?
We're mostly talking digital. Like now that they've done the transformation, or they're on their way onto digital, and you're not relying anymore, because before it was relying on print ads, and that's gone. And looking at digital, it's not as much on banner ads anymore. You got to get a bit more creative. There's sponsored content, there's native ads.
Yeah, there's so many ways of making use of all this. Traditional display ads are still there. They're moving more into the programmatic way of buying those ads because people are concentrating more on using, on working on the emotional side of the readers, which is content. Right. So basically, you see a lot of native advertising. Brands are using more content to talk to those readers, to those consumers, to reach them through emotional ways of doing things. Data is a big thing, of course, and how to sell or you make use of those things, because data, if you're measuring all the data that of your platform on your platforms, you'll get to know the behavior, the user behavior. You get to know what interests those people, and so on and so forth. A lot of brands are extremely interested in buying and knowing more about those readers and how they interact. Where do they go after they read your article, and so on and so forth. So there are so many ways of selling or making use of how people consume your content on a specific website.
Yeah, I mean, back to Ayman's point, I think there are many ways for monetization. At DMS specifically, we really focus on native and branded content because we've seen the decline of attention when it comes to the typical display banners. So I think native and branded content are the two ways to go when it comes to monetization. But I think my question to you would be, do you mean monetization from the publishing house or monetization from the actual editors?
It's a good question. Which approach is better as well? I mean, a lot of the editors don't know, they like taking things onto their own hands. They probably might not have the right team to do so. When do you outsource this?
Sure. So I think today we've seen a new kind of news happening, which is with democratization of content and democratization of opinions in general. We've seen that, and the use of smartphones and cameras, anyone can be sending news, or anyone can have the opportunity to be, I would say, an unprofessional editor, if that makes sense. We've seen companies like Al Arabiya talking about iArabia, and Ara, for example. And it's giving the opportunity for everyone to actually put on content and say their opinion and get you the news live where it's coming from. So if you're a professional editor in this case and you want to monetize your content, there's different ways. There's deals directly with the publisher. But you can also put up some of your content today on social media and get 45 to 50% back on every piece of advertisement that is being pushed on it. So that's a different way of monetization as well. I've seen some models, not in the company, not in DMS, but I've seen other models in the US where actually the editors get paid on the amount of views that they get with the publisher. So, so there's a lot of different ways that you can look at it from this angle, from an editor perspective. From a publisher perspective, I think it's quite straightforward. The more views you get, the more inventory you have, the more you can sell, the more you can push native, the more you can push branded content, and the more you can push display overall.
Okay. I think I've spoken to a lot of editors recently, especially like in all these conferences, but tech sector or otherwise. And everybody has the same problem. Sales team wants to sell more. Their sponsors want more. Their sponsors want their opinion in their pieces. There's so much sponsored content. There's so much native ads. And you look at like proportionally, where does this end? Where does that line come in between making the money and creating proper editorial content with integrity without them getting affected with each other? Because the line just keeps getting thinner and thinner by the day.
We're going through rough times.
I mean, yes, it's a very thin line, but today it's also mathematics, as Moustafa was saying. Today, what you have as inventory is what you can sell, and this is where it ends. I mean, when your inventory is done, this is where you can't sell anymore. But when you come back to the native, you were saying that there's a lot of mix between actual editors' stories and articles versus what brands wants to push. And this is where the actual brand comes in and says, we cannot use any kind of native or any kind of content to display on our using our platforms, because there's the integrity of the actual brand itself, and that is extremely important to understand and know. The editors need to know. The sales team needs to understand as well. Because if you lose the integrity of this specific product, then you're going to lose it all. And you're going to lose the inventory, you're going to lose the sales, and this is a very short way of looking at things. So it shouldn't be a thin line. It should be a brick wall. It should be extremely important to really make sure that the content generated by the editors is bold, is there, while the native is thrown using. We have a lot of technologies that we can use to really reach the right readers for that specific native article that you want to write.
But it's also, I guess, very important to always identify what's been sponsored, because you also see a lot, especially online, where... That's
the problem that we're facing today on digital, because it's about, you can always know.
You'd be surprised. There was a research I was looking at on whether people looking at certain articles, whether they can identify if this is a sponsored content or not, if this is branded, if this has been paid for. Because there's a lot of times where it's not clear, or it's like very down, like in very fine print, this is a very sponsored, like, so I think it's very important that it's identified, the sponsors, like there's like probably, I guess, a branded page or something that's done differently. That's what we do, at least. Like, we have the logo there, it says that it's sponsored, it's in people's faces so that they know, and it's not in fine print as well.
I think, digital is still young.
Right.
We're still going through the trial and error. I don't know if you agree with me. There's a lot of trial and error that's going to happen over the next couple of years that will really define everything, that all those questions that we really want to talk about. So, be it how we really sell content, let's put it this way, because it sounds terrible coming from a print as an editor. If you want to tell them we're going to sell, this is what we're doing, content on the website, they're going to come and tell you, but I can't write something that I don't believe in. But this is completely different, because the way things are consumed online are completely different than the way things are consumed on print.
Well, back to your point today, and Ayman's point that the consumption is very different, and we're going back to the native concept. It depends on what the proposition is, right? So we've seen a lot of people in the market, a lot of players in the market that deliberately do that. They do not put that whole, make it very clear that this is sponsored by a brand or so on. I think we made it very clear that if a brand comes on of some of our publishers, it's very clear that the logo is set there from the very beginning in the title, so the reader knows. Because back to Ayman's point, if you lose your integrity here, then you're going to lose, you have much more to lose than just putting a logo and making sure that the user knows that this is sponsored. But this is where foul play comes in situation, and we see that people or publishers, some publishers are extremely desperate to get those extra clicks on the sponsored stories, and they're willing to go far measures. It's typical situation where sometimes you open the typical newspaper ad, and then you see that the terms and conditions are written in a very small font at the bottom because they don't want you to read it, because they don't want you to know your rights. So we've seen that happening on the native concept, but it's always going to be this fight. I wouldn't say it's a fight, but I'm always going to see this argument between the artist and the businessman, right? It's been going on for centuries. The editor here is the artist. He's the creator of the content. He's creating his masterpiece. And the businessman wants the money. He wants to make sure that he can sell this masterpiece.
I'm actually looking around to see if there's anyone from our sales team here listening to this.
I think they just left.
I think they just, when we got to monetization.
I'm on the business side of things, yeah, so. But of course, like if the business side doesn't work, then, and you're creating the most beautiful piece of art, you're gonna be out of editing soon. And if the piece of art is not good and doesn't have integrity and so on, then you cannot sell it. So it's really that combination of both.
The right balance as
and
well.
The right balance, of course.
I'm being signaled that we're out of time. Do we have time for a question at least? One? No, nothing. So if anybody has any questions, you can find the guys out here. I guess they're hanging around for a while now.
Yeah.
I want to thank you guys both for your valuable insights. Don't know about everybody else, but I've gained a lot from this.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rita, so much for moderating this panel. Thank you, Ayman and Moustafa. I would like to ask you guys to join me back at 12:15 as we are running now for a coffee break. The next panel will be about online content. We'll explain about it later after the break. Please go have some coffee, freshen up, and see you in half an hour. Thank you so much.